Hey everyone, today we're going to jump in a time machine and head way back to the 7th century BCE. Why? Because we're going to dig into the real story of one of history's most misunderstood jobs, the astrologer of Babylon. No, really, think about it for a sec. What pops into your head? You're probably picturing some mystic, right? Pointy hat, gazing into a crystal ball, maybe muttering vague prophecies from a lonely tower. It's a great image, super powerful. But, and you're going to love this, it's almost totally wrong. The reality, oh, it's way more complex and honestly, so much more interesting. See, the Babylonian astrologer wasn't some mystical fortune teller. Nope. They were a highly trained government official, basically a scientist whose entire job was built on rigorous mathematics and whose reports were treated as vital national intelligence. So, to really get this, let's follow an actual guy, Marduk Shum Eden. His official title was Scribe of the Great Celestial Omen series, which, let me tell you, was a huge deal. It came with a ton of prestige and even more responsibility. And his daily routine, it tells us everything about what this job was really like. All right, so you think his day starts with stargazing, right? Wrong. His day actually began with something super physical, super earthy. It started with clay. You have to remember, he was a scribe, which basically meant he was a craftsman. He had to make his own materials, mixing water and clay to get these perfectly smooth, wet tablets. I mean, this was tough, physical work, but it was absolutely crucial. Think about it. These tablets were like the hard drives of their time, the foundation for literally all knowledge. Okay, so once that physical grunt work was done, then the real mind-bending stuff could start. He had to calculate the movements of the planets and stars, and to do it, he used a math system that was just, wow, brilliantly sophisticated. They called it the sexagesimal system. We'd call it base 60 math. So we use a base 10 system, right? Probably because we have 10 fingers, makes sense. But the Babylonians, they used base 60. It was incredibly useful for calculating things like time and circles. And the crazy part? This ancient system, it's still with us. Right now. Today. Yeah, no joke. Every single time you glance at a clock or talk about a circle, you are using ancient Babylonian math. The 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour, 360 degrees in a circle, all of it is a direct legacy from these ancient scribes. It's wild, isn't it? Their 4,000-year-old world is still quietly running in the background of ours. All right, so as the sun goes down, our guy Marduk Shum Idin's job completely changes. He'd head up the great Etemenanki Ziggurat, this massive towering temple right in the heart of Babylon. This was his lab. And get this, he wasn't just, staring up at the sky. He had tools, specialized gear for the job. He had a water clock, a clepsydra, which let him time things with incredible precision. And he had a sighting tube to lock in the exact position of planets and stars. These were the real instruments of ancient science. So when Venus rose, the path Jupiter took, even the color of Mars, every single detail was carefully observed and carved right into those clay tablets he made earlier. This wasn't just chilling and looking at stars. This was science. It was systematic, long-term, raw data collection. And they were doing it on a massive scale. But, okay, collecting all that data, that was only half the battle. The real question was, what did it all mean? This is where the job got really high stakes. He had to read what they believed was a kind of divine code written across the heavens. So how'd he do it? He had a master reference guide, the Enuma Anu Enlil.
The best way to think about it is like a massive database or a giant cosmic library filled with thousands of if-then statements, all compiled over centuries. If the moon looks like X, then it means Y for the kingdom.
And here's the absolute key, you guys. The omens weren't about your love life or if you're going to get rich. They were about the fate of the entire state. Is the harvest going to fail? Are we about to get hit by a flood? Is an enemy army on its way? The astrologer's report was basically a top secret intelligence briefing for the king. This was national security. And believe me, some of these omens were way more terrifying than others. The absolute worst case scenario, the most catastrophic prediction, involved a lunar eclipse. Yeah, according to their trusted text, an eclipse happening under just the right or wrong conditions meant one thing: the king is going to die. So, what do? I mean, seriously, your science, your data, your most sacred texts, they all agree that your king is about to die. You can't just stop the eclipse, right? So you have to find a loophole. You have to figure out a way to trick the cosmos itself. And their solution was, well, it's pretty shocking to us, but to them, it was perfectly logical. It was called the substitute king ritual. Here's how it worked. First, they'd find a commoner, dress him up in the king's clothes, and put him on the throne. He's the decoy. Meanwhile, the real king goes into hiding, and everyone just calls him the farmer. The idea was that this substitute king would soak up all the bad mojo, all the divine anger meant for the real king. And then, once the eclipse was over and the danger had passed, the substitute was executed. The real king comes back, totally safe. I know, from our modern view, that sounds just unbelievably brutal. But you have to see it from their perspective. For them, this was a rational, almost medical procedure. The data pointed to a terminal diagnosis, and this was the life-saving surgery required to fix it. And this whole ritual, it really gets us to the absolute core of the Babylonian worldview. A way of thinking where two things we see as total opposites were actually just two sides of the same coin. On the one hand, you have rigorous mathematical prediction. And on the other, you have this intense religious ritual. For us today, totally separate worlds, science and religion, right? But for the Babylonians, nope. They were the same thing. It was one continuous process. You use science to figure out the problem, and then you use ritual to apply the solution. One flowed seamlessly into the other. It just made sense. So what's the big takeaway here? What should we remember? Well, first, that the Babylonian astrologer wasn't just one thing. They were a scientist, a craftsman, and a top political advisor all rolled into one. Second, their science wasn't just some abstract thing for understanding the universe. It was a hands-on tool for managing reality. And maybe most important of all, they lived in this world where the cosmos and the state were completely intertwined. The fate of the kingdom was literally written in the stars. And that kind of leaves us with one last thing to think about. I mean, look at our world. We're drowning in big data, in predictive algorithms that tell us what we'll buy, who we'll vote for, what's going to happen next. But in our race for all this pure, objective data, have we maybe lost something that they had? That deep, profound, and sometimes terrifying feeling that all those numbers are actually connected to a shared human destiny?